G'day, you're listening to the Virtual Staff Room, and this is episode 3. It takes leadership. Hi and welcome to this edition of the Virtual Staff Room. One of the new classroom technologies that's really reshaping how teachers teach seem to be interactive whiteboards. Interactive whiteboards, or IWBs, are hugely popular in some parts of the world, the UK being the obvious example. But here in Australia, and in Canada for that matter, we've still got a bit of catching up to do. And one of the discussions I keep hearing from people is about implementing boards in a classroom. How do you get started introducing interactive whiteboards into a school? How do you pick the right equipment? How do you manage its introduction? How do you pay for it? How do you train the staff? So this week I thought we'd try to get to the bottom of some of these questions. And I've asked 3 guests this week to come along and share some of their great tips and knowledge about implementing interactive whiteboards. John Pearce is a Victorian teacher who works a lot with interactive whiteboards and is a great champion of their use. And John's going to give us some excellent advice on getting started with IWBs. For a bigger picture perspective, I also asked Mal Lee and Margo Metcalf to join us. Mal and Margo operate IWBnet, which is an organisation which offers advice, support and ideas to teachers who are taking the IWB plunge, and they've also got some great tips on how to effectively implement a whole school approach to introducing whiteboards in your school. So without further ado, I hope you enjoy this week's chat. Well, I'll tell you what, this sounds really good. This is working really well, this 4-way thing, so I'm pleased so far.
And
I'm not going to tempt fate by saying anything else.
No, don't say anything more, Chris. Margo and I are noting this.
Oh, well, we might get started then, guys. First of all, thanks for everyone getting up early on a Sunday morning and joining me. Sunday morning in Australia, and it's about almost 6 o'clock in the evening here in Canada. And I thought I'd just start by getting everyone to just introduce themselves. And seeing you're online first, John, I might get you to start. Just tell us who you are, what you do.
Okay, yes. Well, good morning, Chris. My name's John Pearce, and I teach grade 3 and 4 in a primary school in Geelong in Victoria. We've had a smart board in our room now for close on 2 and a bit years, and we have 7 altogether in the school. At the moment, couldn't think of life without it, but that may happen if I have to shift rooms next year. But we'll get over that when we have to.
It'll keep you at the same school for a while anyway.
It will. It will.
Mal, you were the next to join us. Can you tell us who you are, what you do?
Mal Lee, yes, I'm a director of IWBnet, an Australian-based company that's been specialising in the use of interactive whiteboards in schools, and particularly focusing on the whole school take-up of interactive whiteboards. And we've been working in this area since late 2004.
And I'll tag onto the end of that, mate, that every person I've ever spoken to and mentioned interactive whiteboards says you should speak to Mal. So you are considered somewhat the guru.
Thank you.
And finally, Margo Metcalf just joined us. Margo, just tell us who you are, what you do.
Well, in such illustrious company, what can I say? Margo Metcalf, I'm a director of IWBnet working with Mal. As Mal said, we've been doing this for a couple of years now, and it is definitely one of the most exciting ventures that I think I've ever worked in. Everybody that you talk to who has either just acquired or has been working with an interactive whiteboard for some time is just so passionate, and to hear teachers talk like that is really, really exciting.
Now, Margo, you just joined us, but I was just saying to the other fellas before you arrived that I was fortunate enough today to be part of the Ontario Smart Board Conference, and it was basically 400 educators from all over Ontario gathered together, and Smart Technologies was doing this workshop day with breakout sessions. And the buzz in the room about whiteboards and what they can do and what they can bring to a classroom was just amazing.
Yep, I agree with you. Everybody I talk to in every session or conference I go to, it's just exactly the same. And when you hear teachers who are disengaged and who aren't even looking forward to coming back from holidays, but then all of a sudden they can't wait to get to school, it's pretty exciting.
Yeah, well, it's good, and it's good to see that sort of excitement. I've just put together a bit of a list of questions here, and I'm hoping that over the course of this podcast we can maybe just discuss, debate, laugh, joke, whatever, about some of the things that people have asked me about what we might talk about in this session. And I thought I'd start with a really obvious one. What exactly is an interactive whiteboard, for anyone who may not know? And I might throw that one over to Mal, perhaps.
Well, basically, the interactive whiteboard is a large digital convergence facility. In kind of lay terms, it is usually a projected image that folk can interact with. It's something that we've found over the years. It's actually very hard for those who don't know interactive whiteboards and what they can possibly do to fully comprehend them unless they see them in action. And that is indeed one of the challenges in spreading the word about interactive whiteboards with educators.
Yeah. Now, John, you use one in the classroom all the time, so tell us what sort of things you actually would do with an interactive whiteboard.
Yeah, well, actually, it's a bit of a misnomer to say we use it all the time. In actual fact, there are lots of chunks of the day when it's turned off. But when it is active and up and running, it becomes something as simple as the normal whiteboard or writing facility that you have in the room, whether it's a chalkboard or whatever, all the way through to a projection device that you can talk to, work with, draw over, dissect, revise, capture multiple parts of, put away, come back to, add whatever you want to, or take away from whatever you want to, if you like. It's
now if I'm a classroom teacher, I'm going to listen to that and go, man, that sounds complicated.
Yeah, coming back, Chris, and probably I should have said before, putting it in context, the interactive whiteboard is of the teaching board lineage. John just made reference to blackboards, to whiteboards. What people tend to forget, that one of the most universally used and successful pieces of instructional technology has been the teaching board. We've been using them since the early 1800s. We went through blackboards, and then into the 60s we went into whiteboards, and they have been used by every teacher all around the world, and they are used today. Blackboards are finally moving out of fashion, but that tradition is there, and the interactive whiteboard really builds on that tradition. Now, the interesting thing is that, as John was alluding to, what the interactive whiteboard does is marry the facilities that you had with the teaching boards with the facilities that you've got with electronic instructional media, most of which, although there's been great hype about them, haven't actually had any impact on the classroom other than the most minimal form. So what the interactive whiteboard does is suddenly give life to those various efforts of vision and sound and computing that we've seen for years trying to find a place. Suddenly with the interactive whiteboard, you've got a marrying of the board tradition, a marrying of the electronic tradition, and then the world's your oyster in terms of what you can do, and that's what I think John was alluding to. Really, at this stage, the limit is more the kind of human mind in terms of the kind of things you could do.
And every day, you're hearing new things being done and things that you really hadn't even thought of, and especially in areas, and this is one of John's expertise, especially in the science area and the maths area. Some of the things that teachers tell you they're doing is just mind-blowing. And the kids just, they almost sit there with their mouth open.
Yeah, nowadays I can teach it and talk to things that previously I just couldn't possibly have thought of. An example was just the other day, we're talking about matter, and we're talking about states of matter and everything else. And you can't really talk about those sorts of things unless you talk about molecules and atoms. But you can't talk about molecules and atoms previously with grade 3s and 4s because you can't demonstrate or show the unseeable. But the other day we had molecules happening all over the place because we had the board, the facility of the board to find a couple of animations that showed a couple of things. We had the facility of the board to go and have a look at things on Wikipedia and put it up on the board. Then we had the capability then of getting the kids just to to take the role play bit. So the role play, they became the atoms and the molecules and everything else. And in the end, I think my kids have got a fair handle on the whole idea of it. And that's not in our curriculum, but because of the board, because it enables me to drag in bits and pieces from wherever and whatever, and put it up, and not only just drag it in and display these things, but take them apart, as it were, and go backwards and forwards over it all. And then, all of a sudden we've got understandings that kids just wouldn't dream of before, or teachers wouldn't dream.
And the neat thing about what you guys are doing with that is, and Margo and I have had this discussion a few times in the past, I've been a teacher who's had a projector in my room for a long time because I teach computing, but at first I couldn't quite see what the magic was with the whiteboard, because to me the magic was still the projector. You could put a picture up in front of the kids. But having used a whiteboard now, I can really see why the magic is the whiteboard, because as a teacher I can be at the front of the class where those kids, in the role of still being the role of the teacher, but yet have all the tools that I would, all the digital tools that I would have access to.
That's right. And that's, Chris, why we use the expression, and we refer to creating digital teaching hubs.
Yep.
With a board at the centre, and you can be reaching out, or you can be creating things in your classes, or as John just indicated, the kids can be interacting, with other kids elsewhere around the world. All of those possibilities are there. But going back to my point I mentioned before in terms of a board, the important thing is that the board is so easy for every teacher to use. We're just rounding off some research in terms of why it is that in schools 100% of teachers are prepared to use the boards when they won't use computers.
Yeah, I have to totally agree with that, because the number of teachers who have seen the board demonstrated and gone, I can do that.
One of the questions we posed in the survey is, how long was it before you became comfortable with a board? Most of the responses were within 2 to 4 months. They really felt comfortable. But somebody made the comment that she felt comfortable within the first 5 minutes. And that's a very important thing in terms of getting every teacher on the staff to use the facility.
In this conference I went to today, I actually made a point of not, even though I know a reasonable amount about the boards, when they split the groups up into different sessions, I didn't actually go off with the advanced group. I made a point of hanging around with the raw beginners, people who have never used a board before, because I was interested to see what their reactions were. And we had maybe a half-hour session, and they were totally comfortable with it by the end of that half an hour. They were navigating around and moving things up and capturing screens and all sorts of things that are relatively complex, but no drama at all.
Relatively complex on their computer, because it's not so readily apparent on a computer keyboard and everything else, and you have to know the functionality things. Whereas with a board, whichever board it is, there are menus in that are designed to be comfortable and easy to get to. And
computer keyboard is not a user-friendly item.
No,
people tend to forget. Computer keyboard can be very daunting.
Apart from the obvious of just keying in words and all that sort of stuff, everything else, yes, yeah. Lots of teachers freak out.
Yeah. Now, Mel and Margo, you guys, because you're involved in iwb.net.au, you guys have got a bit of research in terms of things like what it takes to integrate these things effectively into a school, I believe.
We've been looking at that for quite some time. We recognised early in the piece that the important thing would be to achieve the whole school take-up of the boards and involve every teacher. That's the bottom line. We were conscious that after 20-odd years of personal computers in schools, still in most school systems, no more than 20 or 30% of teachers were using computers in their regular teaching. And we had experienced a situation, the now kind of famous Richardson Primary situation, where we did research where we saw every staff member using it. And these were staff who, as you just alluded to, Chris, who had basically not used computing, but definitely hadn't used boards. And within 2 years, they were regularly using the boards in their everyday teaching. And as John alluded to before, that didn't mean the board had to be on the time, but it was a facility they had to use whenever they thought it was appropriate. So we kind of built on that and then asked why it was that was able to be achieved? And the answers lie in some of the factors that we've touched upon in terms of the teacher's comfort and such like, but it also comes very strongly from appropriate leadership within the school, that the achieving of whole school take-up and the sustaining of the whole school take-up, when you get the turnover of staff that you'd normally get within a school, is a challenge that the leadership needs to take on board. And surprise, surprise, right up front, the principal plays a fundamental role. Then the principal invariably has to be supported, and we use the expression a doer. It doesn't matter whether that doer is your assistant principal or director of information services or an IC coordinator, but you need that person who handles the day-to-day, implementation, takes people over hurdles, holds people's hands when they've got a moment of difficulty, all of those issues concerned with the daily nitty-gritty. The principal invariably... Yeah, sorry,
really
Margo.
needs to be driven from the top. Sorry, Margo, go.
That's all right. And what the research clearly showed to us, though, is that and no disrespect to any IT people, but if an IT person decided to buy a board as a nice piece of technology to bring into a room, that certainly didn't do the job. And it really does need to be something that is thought about, planned, budgeted for, of course. But what Mel was saying is that really the teaching, the professional development is so important for teachers. And often it only has to be show and tell sessions at the staff meetings. They can be very informal to begin with, but teachers need to, I guess, gather ideas and feel comfortable that they could have a go at it with the support of the leaders. Because if you're doing it in isolation in one room with one person, it's just not going to happen.
Yeah. Now, have you guys got any data on are there any models for PD in terms of whiteboards that work better than others?
We've got quite a few different models, Chris, and I think it's horses for courses, that what you find works in one school doesn't necessarily work in another, and that's obvious. Right. But it's fundamental that it's being led by a person in the school across the school, not within one component of the school. Yeah.
And building on with what Margo was just saying then, Chris, clearly if you've got a school with 10 staff, let's say a primary school with 10 staff, it's a very different situation when you've got a school of, say, 1,500 kids and you're in a vast multi-campus situation. But the important thing in all of it is, as Margo said, there is somebody who is guiding it and allocating the time. And the time is the important thing. Teachers need time to play in the sandpit.
Yep.
And in this kind of economically kind of being counter-driven times, people forget that you need just to allocate time. And it can be simple things, Margo kind of alluded to, that just allocate time and say every second staff meeting, get rid of much of the administrivia that consumes staff meetings, and let staff just talk about the things they're doing with the boards. Let a John Pearce talk for 5 minutes and share the ideas, but you'll find that people have got particular expertise, even in a primary school. John might be interested in science, a colleague might be interested, the music person, and they can give up the ideas. Then you need outside stimulus, opto conferences, seminars, specific workshops, but a combination of those things guided by somebody high in the school.
Yeah. I read somewhere once that if the guys that work at Google get 1 day off a week to work on a project of their own choice. Have you read that? Yeah. Yep. And that's where a lot of their best ideas have come from, simply by giving people time to go and play. Yeah,
don't expect staff to do this stuff at 9 o'clock at night. When you know it's buzzing when you go into a school. Well, that's often all. But you know it's buzzing when you go into a school and they're chatting the ideas around the coffee urn.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, the notion that you've got to have the support from the top is important. Yeah, I would suggest that in our place, even though we're quite reasonable, we've got, as I said, 7 boards and that happening. It still hasn't permeated to. We've got a new principal, so that's possibly one of the reasons. But it still hasn't really got to the top. It's a showpiece thing when parents and children are brought through the school, they come via the whiteboard rooms, this is one of our key features. But in terms of, as Mel said, allocating time to professional development and ongoing support still isn't there, and it's an argument that's being had, but it's not being totally responded to. It lies underneath. We've got to talk pedagogy first now. Hang on. Doesn't the board impact on pedagogy in a big way? Well, it's still not seen as majorly important. So, even though we've got some really good practitioners with the boards in their room, we've still got more rooms without boards, and that is a problem because they're missing out on that experience and those opportunities, Chris, not only as teachers but for kids too.
Yep.
Yeah,
Chris, just building on that, I think the key in terms of the implementation, the key is to work towards a critical mass of interactive whiteboards in a school. Don't play around with pedagogy. Don't try and change people's teaching before introducing the boards.
I would
That's
imagine
been
that
the
once
approach
the
in
boards
the
go
past.
in, then the teaching pedagogy will kind of
Will change,
morph
and
anyway.
then they will. The key bit is to get 100% of teachers comfortable. And when you've got the momentum and when you've got the total staff on board, then things will happen, and then staff are prepared to vary their approaches. But if you go to a teacher and say to a John or a Mel Lee, you've got to change your teaching style, well, you know how teachers are going to respond and they're going to tell you what to do.
Yeah, for sure. For a lot of schools, I imagine the whole school approach is probably not a realistic goal in the short term.
Depends on the size of the school, but we looked at 8 schools in our research.
I'll just interrupt you for a second. I say what made me think of that, just saying that then, was because I was talking to people today at this conference who were sort of knocked away with this, how great this board was. But then when I said to them, well, maybe you could fundraise this or do that or get the money somehow, they kind of went, we don't even have heating in our room. And this is Canada, man.
Yeah, well...
So I kind of sympathise with those sorts of schools and those sorts of teachers who, are really struggling financially.
It would be a rarity in a Western environment. I'd make the comment that in the Australian context, that any Australian school that wants to can put interactive whiteboards throughout the school very quickly if the leadership is of that mind.
Yeah, well, I guess that's...
And the reason I say that is that 2 of the schools that have been the Pathfinders were 2 formerly disadvantaged schools in the Australian context.
Yep.
They were designated as such, yet both of those schools had boards throughout the school within 2 years. Because the principal decided to back the proposition and to find the funds and to prioritise them accordingly.
Right. Oh, well, that's what it comes down to then, eh?
That's the key. And in a big school...
I think too, and I hear what you're saying, Chris, about the, we don't even have heating, because we do have that comment often about, oh, gosh, it's, great to say that it's ideal to put it right through the school, but, I can't even buy new textbooks this year. But I guess the point that Mel makes is that whilst, yes, you won't go whole of school from day one, that's where you should be planning to go.
Right.
And you should certainly think about how you're going to get there and how progressively you're going to allocate the funding. So it's not a matter of saying, yes, we're going to go whole school, but it's a matter of looking at how am I going to go whole school, which teachers and classrooms are the most obvious to start with a progressive plan to roll them out into all the other classrooms so that the whole staff is involved and sitting waiting on that date for their board to arrive.
Yeah.
That's the ideal.
And yes, you've got to make some decisions. You probably are going not to renew the lease on your computer lab because in the reality, interactive whiteboards are a cheap way of bringing in ICT across the school compared to what has been done thus far.
That's a good point.
Yeah, we've got a computer lab, and my room is directly next to the computer lab. And it distresses me so many. I shouldn't say this about my colleagues, but it distresses me so many times when I walk through past the computer lab there, and you see 25 children all word processing. We're using this enormously valuable resource to do something that they could have done just as easily back in the classroom. But in terms of an instructional facility, I actually like doing most of my instruction about applications and that in the classroom with the board. There are a number of features about that seem to work better. First off, you've got all the children there sitting close in front of you, not at a computer, not at a monitor that you can see sometimes or whatever. You've got it so that you can show them on the board with your finger, your pen, or whatever you're using, whichever board you're using, directly, rather than whoops, there goes the mouse pointer up to the top, down the bottom. We've got to look here. So in terms of the instruction for the teacher, it's a lot easier. Then once you've gone through the steps and everything else, then you can ask the children from the floor to come do exactly and repeat the activity. So, which sub-menu do we go to, which part do we go to, and everything else. And that tends to concentrate the mind an awful lot with the kids sitting on the floor, because that I could be asking you to come out the front, what comes next, and if you haven't paid attention, and you can go backwards and forwards a lot easier, and then you set them loose and say, well, okay, guys, off you go to the computers and do whatever you got to do. And there's a tendency then that they can remember, if it's a lockstep approach, or if it's go and find wherever things are on the thing, that they do it a lot more efficiently.
Now, speaking of your kids, John, John's been kind enough to do a couple of sound grabs for him. He sent his kids off the other day with a little voice recorder, and they went outside and talked about what they liked most about the interactive whiteboards. So we're going to listen to a couple of those.
I like how you can do different stuff with maths and English. Like with multi-maths on the computer, you can get dice out and roll it, so it's got more chance. And you can get a fractions chart and all that kind of stuff. That's what I like about it.
There are downsides about the interactive whiteboard, as in it slowly gets dimmer and dimmer, so you need to take it to get repairs.
What I like about it is that we have a normal classroom whiteboard, and the smartboard's better because it is bigger so the whole class can see it.
What I like about the interactive whiteboard is that on a normal whiteboard you don't have programs, but on the interactive whiteboard you have programs, so you can go into like smart ideas and programs like that.
I like the interactive whiteboard because we can save our work, and then in a couple of weeks' time we can look back and remember what we did.
What I like about the interactive whiteboard is with the pens, they don't run out of ink like normal whiteboard pens, so that's really good.
What I like about the interactive whiteboard is it's really good for demonstrating when you have it for the whole class.
You can show the whole class things on it, such as things on the internet and Wikipedia and all that.
Most of those are grade 3s, by the way.
Yeah, and that sounds like they absolutely love them. Like, there were some very funny comments in there.
I mean, the other obvious thing that people tend to forget is that the board, like the teaching board, can be used from kindergarten through and can be used in every subject area, K to 12.
So, I'm hearing the business term, total cost of ownership. The TCO on these things actually must be pretty reasonable when you look at it like that.
Yeah. And particularly if they're installed when new plant goes in.
Yeah.
If you're doing building extensions or whatever, then they go in and they complement, the existing, boards that are in the classroom there already.
So, we're talking about money. So, ballpark figure, and I know it's only a ballpark figure, to put, a board and a projector and the installation of everything into a classroom. Approximate cost?
In the Australian context, using Australian dollars, yep, I would think a figure of around about $5,000 would set up what we might call a digital hub. That's kind of locating the board, the data projector. It's assuming probably that you've got some kind of computer already available as your kind of driving unit.
Yep.
But if you add a scanner and a cheap surround sound system, card reader, you can do all of that for around about $5.
Yeah, wow.
Depends
not so
on
long
the
ago,
board
that
you
was
opt
not
for.
much more than the cost of a decent PC.
Yep. Yep.
And let's face it, a lot of the board manufacturers often, have specials where they do a 2-for-1 deal. So you want to wait for the Christmas specials to arrive.
Yeah, we had one of those today. Everyone who attended the conference, buy one board, get one free.
That's right.
Yeah. And would you believe they gave 6 boards away at the end of the conference? They drew numbers out of a hat, and one of them was won by one of my teaching colleagues who decided to go home early for the day.
Oh no!
Never again.
Sorry, Clark, you missed out, buddy.
Oh,
Yes, nasty.
And the marketplace, I'm sure Mel will bear me out on this. The marketplace is becoming increasingly more competitive. And they are out there making sure that what's the good things and the best things about, and that the sweeteners almost are a bit over the top. I know that the last one that we bought, we've actually ended up with facilities that we don't really need and use, but that's okay because we just transfer them to another room. But we've got a wireless keyboard, a wireless mouse, a tablet with another wireless mouse, It's overkill almost.
Yeah. Well, I don't want to harp on money because that's not what we're here to talk about. But even the cost of projectors has come down so much now. You can buy a decent projector for probably 20% of what you would have paid even 3 or 4 years ago.
From my limited experience, anyway, the projector is probably the most critical part of the whole deal. That if you haven't got a decent projector set up well, that a lot of the other things can founder.
Yeah.
I don't know, Mel, what you'd say.
I wouldn't put it quite the same way. I say the data projector is at this time with the technology, it's the weak point. It's the bit that you've got to set up very carefully, and you've got to allow for the fact that the bulb could go and it could set you back a few dollars. And so in terms of the reliability, functionality, John's right to point towards the data projector. That's why it's got to be ceiling mounted, and it's got to be out of the way, it's got to be maintained. There's not much that's going to go wrong with the board. Your computer you can invariably kind of replace pretty quickly. At this stage with the technology, the data projector is a concern. What I would say is the crucial bit, and this adds to John's comment about range of boards on offer. The key bit is the teaching software that comes with the board.
Yes.
And we make the point that if you're selecting an interactive whiteboard, you need to buy for the sophisticated user, and that's going to be both your kids and the teachers who within 12 months will be flying, and they will be pushing the envelope with the software, and they will want that sophistication in the software more so than in the things that John alluded to, the wireless facilities, the tablets, etc. It's the software, the ability to interface with other software to make it a digital hub. That's the crucial thing. And some of the boards are at this stage, and I know some boards are now coming onto the market that are inexpensive and starting to come out of Asia. The reason they're inexpensive is they don't have the sophisticated teaching software.
Well, interface is everything. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's that interface and ease of the interface and the ability to save time and ultimately kind of mesh with the learning management systems and things like such that are going to be so important for the classroom teacher.
I read an email during the week, guys, that it was from Christine Nyquist, who's a member of the Oz Teachers Group. And she actually specifically asked the question that her school's looking at purchasing some boards, and she was looking for any feedback as to what to look for.
Yeah, well, we put together some criteria, and most of it has to do with both that teaching software and also it has to do with the support that you're going to get from the company.
Yep.
One of the strong things that we get phone calls daily asking us what board they should buy. And we never get into a preference discussion. What we do say, though, is that it's fundamental to make sure you visit a couple of different schools with different boards and ask those teachers and the principal why they made that decision, based on what criteria, to also ring a number of schools, other states, other countries even, but to very much make sure that the support that you're going to be getting is from an educator, as much as it can be, not a salesman. That you really need to be shown how to use a board from a teacher or an educator.
Before I left Canada, we were in the process of buying some boards, and it's just been put on hold till I get back. But I found that the couple of manufacturers that I approached were more than happy to organise a loan board and let us try it out, or tell us to somewhere where we could go and try it out. And that was a really valuable exercise, to actually go and play with a few different brands, because it quickly became apparent to me what we wanted and what was going to work for our particular situation.
Chris, whenever we kind of see this kind of what board should I go out and buy, you invariably need to come back with a question as to what are you intending to do with it.
Right.
And the key is to get them back to focus, for the whole school to focus on their teaching, and that they're simply acquiring an interactive whiteboard and the complementary kind of technology to enrich the teaching. So if you focus on the teaching side of it and not the you-bit features that some board manufacturers like to play up that teachers will never use.
Yeah, I agree with you.
But just focus on those things that will enrich the teaching in the school. And having said that, I think I could point you to a school that swears by every one of the boards available in Australia.
Yeah, really.
They're using all the functionality, they love what they're doing, and they build on that. And it gets into a bit of, and this is a kind of an Australian expression, I know, but you'll understand, it gets into the Holden Ford kind of debate, or the Mac PC kind of debate.
VHS
the reality, that kind of situation. But if you focus on the teaching and how it can enrich the teaching, then it puts it all in context.
Yeah. Now, speaking of the teaching, can we just, I don't want to sort of go too much longer, or this episode will be too big to download, but just focus a couple of minutes on what sort of effect this has on the learning outcomes you'd expect to get out of the kids you teach.
Well, I'll just jump in quickly and then let John and Margo elaborate in more depth. You won't get a dramatic change in the teaching unless you really address wisely the teacher development. Mm-hmm. A recent UK study on the impact of the interactive whiteboards on literacy in the UK brought out the fact that the schools concerned hadn't done the concerted homework on teacher development.
Right. The take-up rate for whiteboards in the UK is about 1 in 2, correct?
It's around 1 in 2. The latest industry figures I saw show that 53% of classrooms in the UK now have interactive whiteboards.
Right.
In Australia, that would be around about 2%, so there is a dramatic difference.
Right. Room to grow.
Room to grow.
Now, sorry, let you get back to what you were saying about...
I was simply making the point that you can't expect any significant enhancement in schools in general unless you address that kind of teacher development and that kind of focused teacher development. But having said that, I made reference to a couple of the disadvantaged schools in Australia that we had done research on, and in those schools the boards have had quite a dramatic impact, and indeed one of the schools picked up a national award because it moved the literacy mean in the state concerned above average for the first time the school had ever done that. So there was quite a change there, but one appreciates, and excuse my dog, one can appreciate that when you're working in a disadvantaged school situation, you can see the change. The difficulty is that when you're in a school that is affluent, it's that much harder to see the change, to document that change taking place. So this is the hard bit, and the interactive whiteboard is but one part of the total toolkit at work in any kind of classroom.
We often are asked about the evidence that whiteboards will improve the learning outcomes, and it's interesting because not too many people undertook any such surveys with laptops. I often was asked if there was evidence that laptops improved learning, and whenever you approached the hardware companies, they didn't want to know about it because they didn't want to know whether it did or didn't, because in their mind, that might affect their sales. So, really, it's such a young piece of technology that we really don't have any hard evidence as yet. But there's a lot of anecdotal out there, and some of that anecdotal is very compelling. And even just down to the fact that, when you look at a school who had an average absenteeism of 53 days per year that now has 2 days per year, that in itself, if the kids are coming to school, they're coming to school because they want to be there. And if they're there, they have to be learning something. And, whilst that is very anecdotal, it's an indication that something's happening in that school.
Yeah.
John made reference to the kind of tone before with his kids. That's the kind of thing. If you go into a school that's using interactive whiteboards, the tone is different. The kids are kind of really engaged.
John?
Yeah, I think yes. All of that, and the fact that if it's being used effectively and well, it becomes almost not transparent, but the board and the mode of working with the board it just permeates the whole of the classroom. So therefore, it's hard to isolate necessarily an effect in terms of outcomes per se. The quantifiable measures. Where they did these at level 3.0 or 3.2 or whatever. But what it does do, it brings a whole lot of other things into play that you couldn't, as I said before, couldn't bring into play, so that you can talk issues, you can talk different things with the kids that you couldn't think of before, and that broadens the level, the breadth of understanding anyway, and maybe raises the level of understanding in some way. But it makes things happen that couldn't happen before now. Where the measures that we've got at the moment will actually measure that, that's pretty tricky to understand. I think it's more attitudinal, more the way that we go about working with our knowledge and discovering knowledge or making knowledge.
I think it's like a lot of things in the teaching profession. It's hard to measure some things with numbers, but teachers in the classroom know that it makes a difference.
The other thing, Chris, is that probably important the thing to say with boards. The funny thing is that the interactive whiteboard has brought once again to the fore the importance of quality teaching.
Yeah.
For a while there was with the notion with computers is that it would obviate the need to, can kind of minimise the importance of the teacher.
Yep, that's true.
The interactive whiteboard reinforces quality teaching. Mm-hmm. As John alluded to, it gives the quality teacher a host of different opportunities to enrich their particular teaching. Mm. And it brings that to the fore.
And when you put it together in that critical mass that Mel was talking about before, it's not the one teacher, the one room or whatever. You've got to have the 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 or whole school thing. Once that happens, then people start to drive each other. I find that I get most of my good ideas not from anything that happens within my room, but from when I've got to go to someone else's room, and that's a problem. And in the process of trying to sort out that problem, all of a sudden you find, oh, hang on, there's a function with the board that I hadn't thought of, or wait a minute, if I did this with that, then this will happen. Oh, I could do that with my kids.
John, I could see that today in this conference. It was so funny all day, just the light bulbs going off in people's heads constantly. Yeah. I could do this that way, and I could do this that I've never been able to do before, and it was really interesting to watch this process happening. And you're right, all of that leads to better quality teaching because people suddenly getting inspired and getting lots of ideas about what they could do that they just don't do right now because it's just too darn hard.
Yes, and that's where indeed.
And it comes back to the leadership to make sure you continue that momentum because the leadership can ruin it so quickly.
Yep. Well, guys, on that note, I'm going to call it quits there. We'll just finish off with any advice you've got to any teachers currently sort of teetering on the edge thinking about looking at whiteboards. Margo?
Personally, I would definitely go and see some whiteboards in action in a classroom with students, of a similar ilk to what what your school is set up as. You can easily find those schools. We've got a directory on our website. So if you just log into the site and go directory schools, they're all very happy for someone to come and visit or to call them. That's definitely my number one advice.
You better give us all the details on the site then.
So it's www.iwb.net.au, choose directories, and then choose schools.
Perfect. Okay. Mel, any words of advice?
If you want your school to really harness the power of ICT and you want every teacher using that facility, the interactive whiteboard is the way to travel. We're not sure of all of the reasons, but we are constantly seeing now schools where 100% of teachers, including the supposed Luddites, are now using both the boards and the related digital technology as an everyday part of their teaching. And that's the important thing. When people get into debates about they could do it this way or do it that way, the reality is that using interactive whiteboards, it can happen and it happens fast. And the challenge for the administrator is to find the money to handle that surge of interest that comes from the teachers and the kids and the parents.
Yep, good advice. And John, I'll let you finish us off.
Well, from a teacher perspective, do it. Just do it. It's so enabling. And if you have to pester, annoy, take some parents to another place. Actually, taking parents to another school, it's amazing how many of the parents at our place who are teachers or have got kids at other places have come on and said, "Oh, gee whiz, wow, can we have to show such and such." And yeah, the word of mouth bit it's spreading so quickly now back here. It's the way to go.
Excellent. Well, good on you guys. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thanks, Chris. Much appreciated.
I think there's been a lot of really sound advice in there. So just to sign off, we've got Margo Metcalf in Sydney, Australia.
Thank you, Chris.
And John Pearce in Geelong, Melbourne, Victoria.
Thanks, Chris. Bye, Margo. Bye, Mel.
And we got Mel in Canberra, Australia. And I'm in Canada, in Ontario. So it's a bit of an international one this week.
Okay. Thanks, Chris.
Excellent. Thanks, Chris.
Thanks, guys. See you all
Bye-bye.
later. Bye. Well, there you have it. I want to thank John, Mel and Margo for joining us this week and sharing some of those insights. I'm sure that if you're one of the many schools who I've been speaking to who have been thinking about starting with interactive whiteboards, then you'll find a lot of what they said very useful, and there's some great tips and ideas in there of what they said. Just before we go, I want to mention I met a couple of people today when I was at the Smartboard conference in Ontario who are doing a similar sort of podcasting thing to what we've been trying to do here with the Virtual Staff Room, which is talking to teachers about what they do in the classroom. Ben Hazard and Joan Badger are a couple of Canadian educators, and they do a similar sort of podcast for teachers, but the difference is they actually specialise in interactive whiteboards. So they talk to a whole bunch of teachers about what they're doing in the classroom, particularly about the IWBs. So if you have an interest in IWBs, you might like to check out their site. It's at www.pdtogo, that's pdtogo.com, and I'll put it in the links for this week's episode. So anyway, that's about all we got time for. See you next week on the Virtual Staff Room. You can find the links to many of the resources we mentioned in this week's show on the website at www.virtualstaffroom.net. And remember, while you're there, if you get a moment, we love to get your feedback, so drop us a comment while you're on the site. Till next time, my name's Chris Betcher, and you've been listening to The Virtual Staff Room.